When my son insulted a black royal guard, we never expected such a heart-stopping lesson. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The sun was blazing, the street was buzzing, and I thought today would be just another ordinary day in our lives. But then, with a clarity that pierced through the noise, I heard it. A sharp, crude remark from Jacob, my 10-year-old. My heart sank. This wasn't just a passing comment, it was an insult aimed at someone standing tall, all dressed in imposing uniform, with a stern expression that seemed to etch the weight of centuries. The guard stood there, unmoving, like a statue carved from anger and valor, but I could see the flicker of shock in his eyes as my son's words cut through the air. Look, Mom, that guy is just standing there like a robot. Jacob laughed, not realizing the danger that sparked like a match inside the silence that followed. My stomach churned, fearing the fallout of his innocent ignorance. I rushed forward, my hands trembling, my breath caught in my throat. The crowd paused. Faces turned toward us, eyes widening, the lingering tension palpable like a thick fog enveloping the scene. Laughter died. I scanned the onlookers, searching for any sign of support, but all I found was disapproval etched across their faces. The air turned heavy, charged with electric anticipation. I wanted to shout, to reach out, to tell my son to stop, to look at the man whose dignity he had just trampled, but I couldn't find my voice. I felt small, helpless. The royal guard shifted, his shoulders squared against the weight of the moment. My pulse raced. My mind screamed for answers. How did we get to this point? Then, like a soldier emerging from battle, he spoke. His voice deep and commanding, cutting through the thick tension like a sword. Language like that has consequences, young man. The way he looked at Jacob, a deep intensity simmering beneath the surface, made my heart race faster. What did he mean by consequences? I was stunned. I saw Jacob's face flush, his innocence battling confusion as he registered the seriousness of the situation. I could see the wheels turning in his little mind, a mix of embarrassment and dawning awareness. The guard took a step forward, the crowd drawn in like moths to a flame. Words matter, he continued, his gaze steady on my son, who was now rooted to the spot, fear creeping into his wide blue eyes. Your thoughts become your actions. You might not see it now, but what you say can hurt. It can lead to things far worse than you might imagine. Chills shot down my spine. Was this a threat? Or a warning? My heart raced as I read the quiet outrage among bystanders, the whispers of shock weaving through the crowd like a gust of wind. Just then, something in the guard's expression shifted. An unexpected softness emerged, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But there's always a chance to learn, he said, turning his head slightly, inviting understanding. But did Jacob comprehend? Did I? I wanted to step in, to shield him from a lesson I knew would carry weight, but I couldn't. I could sense the tension that teetered on a knife's edge. What would happen next? Would this moment blur into another memory? Or would it carve a scar deep enough to awaken a change? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, suffocating as if the air itself was thick with unspoken truths. Jacob's small frame trembled with the realization of his error, and in that instant, my heart broke for him. He was still a child, marching through life with a naive innocence that was both beautiful and tragic, and now, caught in a world that demanded so much more understanding than he possessed. The royal guard stood there, his military posture unwavering. Yet I felt a crackle of energy between him and my son, a strange interplay of authority and compassion. I half expected him to give a final warning, to dismiss us with a shake of his head as he returned to his duties, but he didn't. Instead, he poured an energy into this unbearable moment that felt almost holy. Have you ever seen the world through someone else's eyes, young man? His words hung in the air, a challenge, an invitation. Jacob's bewilderment was palpable, his blue eyes wide. Searching the guard's dark gaze as if looking for answers, I found myself holding my breath, intensely aware of the faces surrounding us. They were alight with interest, judgment mingling with the flickers of empathy. What would they see when they observed this exchange? I strained to anticipate the murmurs that would ripple through the crowd after the storm had passed, but all I felt was a deepening sense of urgency inside me. I've seen. Jacob faltered, grappling with words that felt too large for him. He was stuck at that painful intersection of youth and awareness. I wanted to step in, to rescue him from this oppressive moment, but a greater part of me recognized the value of it, a lesson entwined in courage and vulnerability, raw and unpolished. What's important is that you try, the guard continued, his tone softening, almost gentle. Understanding doesn't come easy. It takes time, but it begins with your words with respect. His eyes flickered briefly to me, as if seeking my involvement in this delicate balancing act. A warmth coursed through me, a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this moment was not the end but the beginning of a passage for Jacob. Perhaps it was a conversation yet to unfold, one that could bridge the chasm of misunderstanding. That I didn't mean to hurt anyone, my son whispered, shame threading through his voice, and I could feel the tremor in his hands as he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. It was a mirror reflection of the struggle that I felt inside, a deep yearning for connection that wrestled with a suffocating fear of failure. The guard stepped back slightly, regarding Jacob with a blend of authority and warmth. Learning to respect others begins with respecting yourself. He paused, drawing in a breath that carried the weight of many burdens. You carry power, boy. What you say can build or tear down. Choose wisely. Tears pricked the corner of my eyes as I witnessed a struggle within Jacob, fighting against his instincts, trying to grasp a lesson that most adults hadn't even managed to understand. It was a tender reminder of his youth, how malleable his spirit remained even amidst such challenging lessons. But then, the moment shifted, a shadow stretching across the gathering like a swift wind turning autumn leaves. A woman in the crowd stepped forward, her face contorting with anger. You're supposed to protect us. Yet here, you're scolding a child. Her voice cut through the silence, raw and pulsating with resentment directed not just at the guard but at a societal failure that had left her feeling marginalized. My heart sank, shivers racing through me. I held my breath, aware that everything hung in the balance. The warmth of that flicker of hope felt almost extinguished in an instant. Ma'am, the guard responded, his voice steady but strained. This is not about punishment. It's about the future of our community, our society. But the woman's anger remained, a blazing counterpoint to the warmth that had momentarily enveloped us. You think scaring children into submission is the answer? It's only fear that breeds resentment, not understanding. The atmosphere crackled with tension, the crowd pulsing with a mixture of support and dissent. I could see Jacob's confusion deepening, eyes bouncing between the two adults, trying to piece together a narrative even I couldn't grasp fully. And then, as if drawn to the maelstrom of emotions swirling around us, I spotted a small girl, no older than 6, standing on the fringes of the crowd. She had tears in her eyes but clutched her teddy bear tightly, a lifeline amidst the commotion. Her gaze was steady, her innocence a poignant reminder of the very essence of kindness and connection we had lost sight of. Stop fighting, she shouted, her voice small but clear as a chime. Just talk. You don't need to be mean. A hush fell over the crowd, every heart laying down its armor for a moment of sincerity, a collective desire to remember the simplicity of compassion in the midst of chaos. If a spell had been cast, I sensed movement within the crowd. The guard stepped towards the girl, crouching down, the tension slowly dissipating under the light of her innocent plea. Jacob looked at me, searching for guidance as his own confusion hung heavy in the air. That I squeezed his hand, and time stood still, caught in a fragile loop of uncertainty. Would this be a turning point in our journey? The lesson could be profound, but would it also break the wall of division, or would it crumble and tear further apart the fabric of understanding between us? The guard smiled gently at the girl, a representation of hope flickering back into existence. You're right, my young friend. We all just want to be heard. But in the shifting, fragile balance of shared emotions, I could feel the crack widening, and a storm brewing on the horizon, twisting toward us. For every act of kindness, Shadows of anger lurked just beneath the surface, threatening to derail everything we had begun to unravel. Who would rise to champion understanding, and who would let the anger fester? And as the confusion in Jacob's eyes met the growing tension around us, I couldn't shake the sense that we were just at the beginning of a journey that might reshape not just our lives, but the values of the world encircling us. The crowd began to breathe again, but the air still felt thick with unresolved tensions. Jacob's small hand in mine trembled. I felt the weight of his confusion resting heavily, as if we were standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering on the brink of understanding. "Mom," I started, his voice barely above a whisper, but I didn't let him finish. I was terrified of what he might say next, terrified he would deep dive into the churning confusion and add fuel to the flames licking dangerously close to our feet. "Shoo," I murmured, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "Let's just listen." I didn't want him to speak again until he grasped the complexity of the moment. The enormity of the lesson about respect, about kindness, about our own biases was too overwhelming to articulate just why I in the midst of this rapid emotional whirlwind. The little girl hugged her teddy bear closer, her blue eyes darting from one adult to the other, searching for reassurance. She was a small beacon of innocence in a world filled with misunderstanding. She stood defiantly against the rising tension, refusing to let the adults overshadow her plea for dialogue. "I just want to be friends," she pleaded again, her voice carrying a fragile honesty that cut through the chaos. "Why can't we all be friends?" As her question hung beautifully in the air, I saw some of the anger in the woman's eyes begin to soften. The fierce lines on her forehead relaxed just a fraction, almost as if the girl's purity had cracked her hardened exterior just a bit. I hoped that maybe, against all expectations, she could rediscover the possibility of hope from this unexpected source. "Yes," the guard admitted, his voice steadier now, as though he were slowly unraveling the tight coils of authority that had bound him. "It begins with talking," like she said. There was a gentleness emerging within his demeanor, as if the words he spoke were unraveling the default armor of authority he wore. And maybe, just maybe, there was a flicker of recognition in the crowd that they were not dealing purely with a uniform, but with a man doing his best amidst the chaos. "Jacob," I whispered, urging him to focus. "Can you see what she's doing? Can you feel how her kindness is shifting things?" He nodded, and his face, usually so expressive, was now a tapestry of emotions, raw and unguarded. A tide of fear, followed by curiosity, finally landing in a longing to understand. I realized that despite the tumult around us, the tender moment shared with the little girl had thrown us a lifeline, an anchor amidst the storm. The woman shifted her weight, her jaw slackening, relinquishing some of her anger. "But how do we even begin to trust each other?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The rawness and authenticity in her question resonated with the crowd, igniting murmurs of agreement. "Trust grows with vulnerability," the guard suggested, his gaze steady. "It starts with sharing, with listening to each other's stories. It's challenging, yes, but when we ignore each other, we let the darkness fester unchecked." Jacob watched in rapt attention. The dichotomy of authority and vulnerability was beginning to sink into his young understanding. "Maybe we could sit together somewhere? I mean, not us, but like groups?" He stuttered, propelled forward by the moment's intensity. "And exchange stories?" A new murmur moved through the crowd, the seeds of possibility swirling gently in the air. Perhaps our shared pain, our shared struggle, could be the bridge we needed. But as the moment began to shift toward the hopeful, I caught sight of a figure standing just beyond the circle. A large man, standing tall, with a furious scowl etched deep on his features. His clenched fists and the fire in his belly spoke of emotions far buried. I felt a chill snake down my spine as the atmosphere shifted again. His presence, like a hawk looming over the nest, invoked a sense of foreboding in my heart. "What nonsense!" he suddenly hissed. "All this talk of stories, all this softness, it's weak. You want to know what will fix things? Strength. Power." His voice boomed, drowning out the lighter moments of hope founded just moments before that I felt my heart race, the crowd surging with divided opinions. The little girl looked frightened, her teddy bear suddenly becoming a lifeboat in a swelling sea of discord. "Who are you to say that?" The woman fired back, a slow burn igniting in her voice once more. You think fear and control is the way to live, to guide? It's the only way they'll listen, he retorted, his eyes wild with conviction, infecting the atmosphere with a sense of foreboding tension. Please, Jacob said softly, an almost instinctual plea for understanding as tears pooled once more in his eyes. Don't. His voice was small, but there was a weight behind it that surprised even me. Don't what? The man shot back, his glare honing in on my son. Don't let our children be weak. Is that what you want? In that fraught moment, as Jacob stood front and center between the chaos and the call for compassion, I saw the crack widening into a chasm, the challenge of acceptance looming ever larger. Hope hung precariously, a thin thread tossed into a storm, about to be devoured by the overwhelming tide of anger. I could feel the fabric of our fragile peace slipping through our fingers, a devastating realization dawning on me. As the tumult continued to swell, I realized our journey toward understanding might take us down paths we had never anticipated, and at that moment, I feared we might lose Jacob to a battle already raging in the hearts of so many. Because as we moved closer to understanding, it also felt like we were standing at the edge of chaos, ready to be engulfed by flames. Would we be able to bridge the divide, or would Jacob become a pawn in a game far larger than himself? The shouts echoed around me, each word bathed in the weight of prejudice and misunderstanding. The crowd's mood shifted like a tempest, amplifying the already charged air until it felt suffocating. Jacob released my hand and stepped forward, driven by the raw sincerity in his voice. The innocence of childhood had propelled him into the fray, a light cutting through shadows. Stop it, he cried, his voice piercing the cacophony, like a solitary star in a pinprick of darkness. The words tumbled out of him with a heart-wrenching urgency, a child grasping for clarity amid the confusion of adulthood. You're making it worse. Can't you see? The large man, caught off guard, faltered for an instant, eyes narrowing as if struggling to reconcile the wisdom emanating from a child's heart. The small girl grasped her teddy bear tighter, wanting nothing more than to be invisible as Jacob confronted this towering figure of anger. Around me, the crowd's murmurs flickered like candlelight in the wind. Some were poised to rally behind Jacob, while others echoed dissent. Any spark of hope pulsed beneath the surface, yet fear tethered us to our respective corners. It was a fragile moment steeped in uncertainty, an emotional tightrope where one misstep could plummet us all into despair. Jacob, please, I urged softly, stepping closer, my heart pounding to match the rhythm of my fear. I wanted to shield him, to pull him back to safety, but my son stood resolute, radiating an empathy I worried even I didn't fully understand. Why do you want to hurt each other like this? He pressed, voice trembling but steady. It makes everything worse. If we don't try to listen, we'll just stay angry forever. He meant it, each word an unguarded plea for unity that hung in the thick air, pure and untainted by the corrosive forces of division. I saw the cracks start to appear in the man's armor, the shifting of his internal landscape as he started to grapple with his fury. You think this is simple? He snapped, though the urgency in his tone was dimmed by lingering uncertainty. You think kindness will keep you safe? Kindness makes us strong, Jacob interjected, unyielding. I know it does. I've seen it. His eyes shimmered with an undeniable hope, bright enough to light the dimmest of hearts. In a world swirling with hostility, he was offering not just words, but the essence of humanity itself. That a hush fell over the noise, a stillness amid the chaos. Jacob's courage pulled at the fragmented threads of tension, weaving them back into a fabric of understanding. Faces turned toward him, absorbing his sincerity. Each soul paused mid-breath, echoing tales of their hidden selves. But tension lingered like smoke, musty, thick, and suffocating. Just as I let out a sigh of quiet relief, feeling the potential for change, another voice shattered the moment. Oh, you want to live in a world filled with weakness? It was the guard, his eyes hardening again, every word crafted at a level dripping with disdain. Most in the crowd flinched. I felt the air shift, grow dense again as we veered into dangerous territory. Strength is what this world needs. Why bother trying to find common ground? No. The woman protested, her voice rising poignantly above the fray. You are just perpetuating this cycle of anger. Look at us. Kindness isn't weak. It takes courage to step into vulnerability. The resolve in her voice called to the crowd's heart, reminding us of the fragile moment we had brushed against moments before. But the large man stood unmoved, a statue carved from pain and fury. Enough of this, he thundered. I came here to fight back against weakness, not to indulge in this nonsense. And just as those words settled, a sharp intake of breath echoed through the crowd. I followed the gaze of the woman, a mixture of fear and surprise collecting in her expression. Around the man, others began to step forward, others who had aligned themselves with his banner of strength and discontent. My heart dropped as a realization unfolded. The rift between those in search of kindness and those embracing confrontation was widening, seemingly insurmountable. Darkness lingered, catching fire again in the faces around us. Suddenly, a loud gasp came from the back of the crowd, drawing our collective attention. A figure emerged from behind the throng, stepping forth with purpose as if summoned by the weight of the moment. A woman, tall and fierce, her skin a shimmering shade of brown that glimmered against the backdrop of discord. Why do you think power is synonymous with aggression? She spoke, voice calm yet resonant, cutting through the turmoil, but laced with years of accumulated wisdom. You wield strength, and you pit it against others, yet you do not see that true power lies in connection. As she spoke, I felt a swell of hope, the kind born from recognizing a kindred spirit without words. Yet even as her voice rose in defiance against the darkness, I could see that fearful glances rippled through the crowd. Fear clashed repeatedly with hope in unfamiliar territory we were all grappling to navigate. I know it's hard, she continued, her eyes piercing through the darkness that clung to thoughts like residues of shame. But listen carefully, for it's now that we can rebuild something together that has long since frayed. And then it sank in, a chilling realization. Her presence was both a balm and a storm. Who was she? How did she come to stand amongst us with such authority? A wild thought shot through my mind. Did she have ties to the menacing man before us? What if this was the spark of warfare, the kind that would engulf our fragile fraternity? But before I could shout a warning, her presence shifted once more. This confrontation I had feared was about to erupt. With Jacob standing bravely at the forefront, I sensed the pivot of an unseen struggle. Jacob, I whispered, heart racing with trepidation. Get behind me. But his gaze remained locked with the fierce woman, a slight tremor now coursing through him. I felt the world teetering on the edge, my fears converging with something else, a breath of courage. But what would it ultimately cost us all? Would this disarmament course through Jacob's heart, or would the raging winds tear us apart forever, leaving only grief in their wake? As the crowd held its breath, uncertainty clawed at my insides. The storm was here, and I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, we stood at the brink of an uncharted battleground. The world around us began to pulsate with a tension I didn't think possible, a living entity breathing anger and despair. Every person in the crowd divided into invisible camps, their eyes darting between the fierce woman and the man whose fury propelled him to the forefront. In that moment, I felt Jacob's small hand tighten around my fingers, an anchor tethering me to reality amidst the chaos. Please, the woman urged the large man, her voice steady despite the turbulence enveloping us. True strength comes not from towering over others, but from lifting each other up. You have the power to spark change. Don't hide behind this illusion of dominance. Change? He scoffed, his voice shaking with disbelief. You think facing the world with open hands is going to protect you? It's a harsh world out there. Weakness will only get you trampled. That a murmur rippled through the crowd at his words, some nodding in agreement, while others recoiled, reminded of their own vulnerabilities. It was in that moment I wanted to scream. The impracticality of it all bore down on me like a weight refusing to shift. I could see unease spreading, a crack that threatened to swallow us whole. But there, against the looming shadow of despair, Jacob's voice cut through the murmur. No, he exclaimed, and the sound echoed with a youthful bravado. You don't have to fight to be strong. Strength can mean lifting someone up when they're down. And kindness, it's what makes us real. The large man flinched at Jacob's boldness, and for a fleeting moment, I thought the words might penetrate through the armor he had worn for so long. The pulse of hope surged within me. If only this moment could breathe life into change. And just then, as if the fates were aligning, the fierce woman stepped closer, kneeling down to Jacob's level. "You're wise beyond your years, young one," she said, eyes softening. "It's voices like yours that can shift the tides of anger into something meaningful. Can you tell me what kindness means to you?" Jacob hesitated, as if the question had pulled back layers of his heart. Perhaps he struggled to define kindness, teetering on the brink of complexity he faced daily. "Kindness," he finally stuttered, "it means listening to someone even when you don't agree. It means being brave enough to share love." Tears pricked my eyes as I watched him dig deep into the well of his innocence, his earnest spirit illuminating the confounding darkness around us. I saw flickers of recognition in the crowd. Gentle nods began to ripple, accompanied by breathy gasps, breaking the tension inch by inch. But swiftly, reality came crashing down upon us again as the large man rumbled in discontent. "You think your words will pacify anything? You're naive, boy." Suddenly, from within the crowd, a voice trembled in the silence. "Perhaps it's time for all of us to be naive then." It was an elderly woman, her body frail yet palpable with strength, stepping boldly toward the center. "I've seen too many years of hatred. It's a cycle we must break, no matter the price." "What do you think drives hate?" "It's fear of not being enough, fear of being oppressed." "But you, young boy," she turned a weathered gaze to Jacob, "you showed us that love isn't just a word or a sentiment. It's an action we must choose every single day." Within me, a storm raged anew, an ache gripped tightly. The air grew thicker under the weight of her wisdom, and I wondered if she could sense the fractures of history where generations had failed to see each other. The man shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the old woman and Jacob, as if trying to comprehensively grasp this tide of compassion overwhelming him. For a moment, vulnerability cracked his facade, and I held my breath, hopeful that perhaps a shift was unfolding. But before I could allow myself to dream of unity, a figure stepped out from the back, someone I recognized all too well. It was Marcus, someone from my past, a once friend turned adversary, embittered by experiences that had carved a dark route through his heart. His demeanor was sharp, matching the aggression in the air. "What are you doing, Marcus?" I whispered under my breath as panic rose within. My heart raced as he approached the center with a dark intent, eyes smoldering. "Didn't anyone teach you that being vulnerable is a free ticket to being prey?" He spat at Jacob and the woman, his voice weaving an ominous thread through the newfound hope. "It's time to stop this facade of kindness. You fight to win, or you don't fight at all." The crowd rippled with unease, and I tightened my grip on Jacob, who remained steadfast, unyielding amidst the turbulence. He had threaded a single thread of understanding throughout the chaotic web, and I could no longer shield him from the weight of the world I had tried so hard to protect him from. I felt a surge of protectiveness rise within me, a primal urge to push back against the storm. But I also recognized that I could not fight Marcus. Neither could I fight the fear that loomed over the moment. It was all entwined like a clench of hands, fear grasping firm hold on the heart. Yet courage dared to flicker in between the angered as Marcus' words dripped from his mouth like venom. I understood we were reaching the precipice of something breathtakingly dangerous. The line had been drawn, and I felt the straining pull of everyone's hopes and fears uncoiling before us. With uncertainty forming the walls around me, I looked back at Jacob, ready to pull him back into safety, when a pitiful plea escaped his lips. "No, we can choose love instead of hate. Please." And just then, as silence blanketed the scene, I exclaimed the words I believed were my only truth. "Jacob." But before I could finish, an explosion of noise erupted. The crowd surged forward, every man, woman, and child divided by fears and battles unseen. The storm had come to meet us at last, and I braced myself for the impact, heart in my throat, ready for whatever revelation lay within the turmoil, threatening to tear our fragile unity apart. The chaos that followed felt like a storm crashing over us, sweeping away whatever semblance of peace had been birthed in the moments prior. I could barely keep my footing as bodies pressed and pulsed around me, each person seemingly caught up in the tide of fear and uncertainty. Jacob tugged at my hand, his small fingers trembling, yet filled with a stubbornness that surprised me. "Mom," he shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "We have to stand together. His sincerity reached into the heart of the mayhem like a beacon, but it seemed to only fan the flames of the situation. The large man's face twisted in a mixture of anger and confusion, fueled further by Marcus' presence. I could feel the tension vibrating in the air, the unyielding current pushing people towards a place of recklessness. Enough! The fierce woman shouted, her voice amplifying as she too felt the rising tide. Fighting among ourselves only strengthens the power of the very hate we wish to dismantle. We must strive to be the change. Are we not here for that? Her plea seemed to momentarily still the crowd. Eyes began to flicker, unsure of who to trust, yet drawn, nonetheless, to the courage of her words. I caught the gaze of the elderly woman who had taken the brave step before. She stood resolutely, her face illuminating the truth that shone from within. And then I saw it shift. In the pockets of the crowd, I saw small moments of kindness ripple outward. A young girl stepped forward, offering her trembling hands to an older gentleman nearby who had retreated into himself. "You're not alone, sir," she said, her voice a mere whisper but packed with bravery. "We can face this together." The sight brought warmth amid the cold chaos, allowing me to breathe slightly easier. But Marcus remained undeterred, his vitriol significant. "Stop this madness," he bellowed, stepping closer to the woman, his face twisted in a snarl. "Words are wind. They don't protect you from reality." I watched Jacob pull himself up taller, courageously standing in front of the wild-eyed figure. "Reality is what you make it," he shouted, his voice ringing clear, unwavering. "It doesn't have to be filled with hate." For the briefest moment, silence hung heavily, power vested in a child's truth that seemed too potent for a world steeped in age-old grievances. But that oppressive silence shattered when the large man growled, "What do you know about reality, boy?" In that instant, I realized how fragile this moment was, much like a leaf caught in the winds of autumn. I wanted to sweep Jacob away, to protect him from the world's cruelty, but what if he was the very change we had longed to cultivate? I looked deep into his eyes, hoping to mirror his courage back to him, to let him know that what he voiced mattered. Then, as if the universe were cruelly toying with us, a loud bang echoed from behind the crowd. In one swift motion, my world spiraled into a different sort of chaos as gasps erupted, followed by the shrill sound of sirens piercing the air. "Is that?" I started, panic rising. Jacob clutched my hand tighter. The crowd, once distanced and conflicted, now shifted into sheer pandemonium. People scrambled to find safety, colliding into one another without thought for the turmoil just moments before. I lost sight of the fierce woman, the elderly figure, and even Marcus, as bodies threw themselves in every direction. I turned back to Jacob, ready to guide him toward an exit, but in that split second, I felt something or someone push me aside. A flash of confusion hit me as I stumbled, hardly able to gauge what was happening or where Jacob had gone amidst the tide of bodies. "Jacob!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed beneath the crowd's frenzied cries. Panic surged through me as I struggled to gain my footing, fighting my way back to look for him, fear clawing at my heart like a wild animal. And then, just as I began turning in desperation, I caught a glimpse of a figure crumpling to the ground. "No!" The word tore from my lips as I pushed myself forward, dread entwining with the rawness of hope. When I reached the uneven mass of people, there he was, Jacob, on his knees, tears glistening in his wide eyes. But he wasn't crying in fear. He was staring at what lay crumpled before him. A figure dressed in the uniform of a royal guard, their bodies sprawled awkwardly, the glimmer of a badge stark against the chaotic backdrop. The scene was surreal, heart-stopping lesson I never saw coming. As I tried to reach him, half-bent to soothe my son, I caught a glimpse of Marcus looming in the background, satisfaction playing at the edges of his features. "See," he spat, a bitter edge creeping into his voice as he nodded toward the fallen form. "This is what happens when we choose the foolishness of kindness over strength." But as the sirens wailed closer, something flickered within the chaos, a surge of resolve lighting up my son's expression. "We need to help him, Mom," Jacob cried, determination overtaking his innocence. In that moment, amidst the carnage, my mind spun with the weight of what was at stake. Would we let fear consume us? Would we allow anger to dictate our response in a moment that demanded kindness the most? As I prepared to reach for him, willing to lead us both down a new path. I felt a shiver down my spine. Something greater was unraveling. The realization crashed over me with stunning clarity. There, within that intensity, an unfinished lesson awaited. The truth of our circumstances would take more than courage to confront, and as the guard lay therein, Marcus' laughter echoed in my mind. The world shifted once again beneath my feet. In the heart of that storm, we were faced not only with the question of love and justice, but with the very essence of who we wanted to be amidst it all. I was about to discover what it meant to embrace hope in the unlikeliest of circumstances, but I had no idea how profound the revelations waiting just beneath the surface might turn out to be. The scenes around us blurred as fear tangled with the chaotic energy of uncertainty. The world had shifted, and I stood caught in its throes, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily against my chest. Jacob remained rooted in place, incredulous, staring wide-eyed at the form of the royal guard. Paralyzed by the gravity of the moment, I feared my son was on the brink of a devastating realization that no child should have to face. "Jacob, we should go," I managed to say, my voice trembling as I inched closer. Yet he didn't budge. His resolve had tightened. "No, Mom. We can't just leave him here." The earnestness in his plea was both comforting and terrifying. There was a wildness in the moment, a sense that we stood on the edge of something profound, perhaps even transformative. I knelt beside Jacob. The sirens screamed louder still, a harrowing reminder that time was slipping from our grasp. The fallen guard, crumpled in defeat, looked so small in that moment, surrounded by the chaos that swirled about us. His uniform, a stark emblem of authority, betrayed the fragility of the life it covered, and I felt an overwhelming urgency to act, to bring light into the dark. That I had always taught Jacob to see the good in others, to trust in kindness even in the eye of storms. But now, standing at this crossroads, I could not help but wonder whether our beliefs would be enough to shield him from the world's harsher realities. Gathering my courage, I glanced at my son, whose youthful determination filled the air with a strange hope. "All right, we can help him, but we need to be careful," I said, though I felt a creeping dread gnawing at the back of my mind. Jacob nodded vigorously, his small hand reaching toward the fallen figure, trembling yet steadfast. I followed suit, my heart pounding as I pressed my palms against the cool fabric of the guard's uniform, searching for life amid the turmoil. My mind raced with questions. Had he been caught in the crossfire of hatred, or was he merely a pawn in a game we had not yet fully grasped? The breaths I took felt shallow, fraught with uncertainty. Suddenly, there came a low moan from the guard, the sound both terrifying and grounding. My heart leaped at the movement, a flicker of life in an otherwise devastating tableau. "Please, stay with us. Help is coming. Just hold on," I whispered, gesturing to the chaos surrounding us, hoping that some unseen force would intervene before it was too late. Jacob's face shone with determination and empathy beyond his years. "You're strong," he said into the quiet chaos, his little voice calm as he offered the guard his hand. "You can make it. We need you to make it." But the guard's eyes fluttered, revealing the burden of pain. I could see in those brief moments, flickering between us, a deep-seated fear mirrored in the storm of my son's eyes, and the unyielding lines etched across the guard's forehead. It was the reflection of a world where everything we held dear felt like it was being ridiculed, torn apart from the seams. At that instant, I felt a surge of anger rise within me, it only directed towards the chaos brewing around, but at Marcus, who had turned this moment into a cruel message that echoed through the hearts of those who stood in judgment. "It doesn't have to be this way," I found myself shouting, the words spilling out before I could even contain them, filled with a potency of their own. The crowd that had once found comfort in anger suddenly shifted. People paused, the energy of the moment dimming at the recognition of truth. The fierce woman from before, I spotted her re-emerging, her quiet strength shimmering like a candle in the distance. She moved toward us, eyes wide with empathy as she crouched beside us, almost instinctively wrapping her arms around Jacob and me. "You're doing the right thing," she urged softly, and I felt her warmth anchor me. "Together, we are strong." But Marcus' laughter sliced through the air, cruel and harsh. "Kindness is weak. That's the lesson here." He spat, his venomous words racing through the crowd and igniting their fear once more. The tension swelled, and I could almost feel the collective heartbeat of those around you, uncertain, but shifting ever so slightly towards something new. The sirens intensified their wailing in the background, announcing the approach of help. Yet even in the distance, I could sense something deeper surfacing, a tremor in the very fabric of our reality that hinted at hidden truths yet to be unveiled. Suddenly, the guard's grip on consciousness tightened, and his eyes met mine with clarity. "Your son, he speaks of change," he gasped, his breath shallow as he fought to find strength. He represents hope. Hope. The word struck me like lightning, unraveling the fabric of despair that had been weaving through my heart. Jacob's innocence stood as a counterpoint against the vitriol of this dark moment, illuminating a path towards something potentially redeeming. But just as light pierced the storm, the ground beneath us growled, rumbling treacherously as discontent rippled through the crowd. And then, like the clashing of ancient titans, uncertainty erupted. "They're coming," someone shouted, fear exploding in a wave among them. My heart raced. Who were they? What more lay ahead? As I shielded Jacob, time slowed, and in that moment of chaos, the world ripped away the mask of order, together fraying the threads of hope we had clung to. I felt it without doubt, the truth that something far deeper awaited us, hidden beneath the depths of anger and heartbreak. And just as I gazed into Jacob's trusting eyes, a chilling realization settled on my shoulders. This was not merely a lesson we were poised to learn, it was a reckoning. The storm that had uprooted us was only a glimpse of the deluge lying just beyond the horizon. An answer loomed terribly close, yet felt impossibly distant. And as the crowd surged around us, cracking at the seams, I understood we were on the brink of something far more profound than just this chaotic moment. A revelation haunted the horizon, leaving us standing at the edge, ready to dive into depths we never wished to explore. The chaos intensified as the crowd surged, a living organism thrumming with discontent and confusion. Fear crackled in the air, but amidst the turmoil, the flicker of hope inspired by Jacob and the wounded guard felt transformative, as if clinging to the promise of something better just beyond the horizon. "Mom." Jacob's voice rose above the discord as he gripped my arm tighter. "We can't let this happen. Not now." There was a wild energy in him, a fire ignited by the shared vulnerability of the moment. I looked down at him, his wide eyes echoing both innocence and an unexpected depth of understanding. He had seized my earlier lessons about kindness, strength, and the responsibility of using one's voice. "Jacob, we need to find somewhere safe," I said, casting my gaze across the faces around us, searching for signs of solidarity amidst the panic. The woman who had embraced us moments before was still there, her presence an anchor of calm against the tidal wave of fear. She nodded toward a nearby alleyway, suggesting it might provide refuge. "This way." As we moved, I felt the pulse of the crowd behind us, a wave pulling in various directions, as confused souls sought comfort in the shared anxiety. An older man stumbled near us, dropping a tattered sign that read, "We are all human." I paused momentarily to pick it up, feeling the words resonate so deeply they pulsed in my chest. "Together," I shouted above the din, holding the sign high. Its declaration caused a ripple through those close by, enough to make some pause, enough to spark fleeting nods of agreement and murmurs of support. But just then, another screech echoed from the edge of the crowd. "They're coming." A woman screamed, a sharp note of panic slicing through our fragile moment of connection. My heart sank as the throng shifted again, and the familial bonds that felt forged in fire began to unravel. The symbols of authority loomed on the periphery, figures cloaked in uniforms that promised safety, but had become harbingers of dread amidst this maelstrom. As the guards approached, I tightened my grip around Jacob, ready to shield him from whatever storm awaited. "Stand down. This is not what you think." The woman beside me, Yohat was her name? I couldn't remember, threw her hand up, desperate to make our intentions clear. "We're not your enemy. Look." I stole a glance at the fallen guard, still fighting against the tide of consciousness as he lay intertwined with the ground. "He needs help," I shouted, feeling the words catch like thorns in my throat. The connection we had forged in those brief moments suddenly felt fragile, as though the possibility of healing was slipping away. There was commotion, a hesitation cutting through the chaos. I could see a flicker of recognition crossing the faces of the advancing guards, an acknowledgement of the humanity displayed amidst the fragmentation. But then, like a puppet on strings, a voice boomed through, fueled by cruelty where hope dared not tread. "This is not your battle. Move aside." From somewhere deep within, anger roared, mingled with fear. It was a cocktail I never wished to taste, but suddenly, I found myself standing tall despite the overwhelming instinct to flee. "We're battling for our right to exist together," I shouted, the sound rising like thunder among the downpour of judgment. Jacob's hand found mine, his small fingers squeezing tightly, igniting a warmth bolstered by steadfastness that electrified the air between us. I glanced down at him. He was trembling but resolute. "Mom, we can't let them drown out our voices." "No," I whispered fiercely, nodding in silent agreement. "We must stand for what is right." In that moment, the weight of all we had faced dawned upon me. We were defining not just ourselves, but our journey, and Jacob's voice was a part of that arc toward redemption. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward, locking eyes with the guard approaching. "The world is shifting," the words spilled forth. "Change begins with compassion, with the understanding that we all share the same ground beneath our feet." A stunned silence enveloped us, a delicate pause that we all seemed to hold our breath within. The guards exchanged cautious glances. Their fortress of authority began to show cracks against the foundations of empathy we were piecing together in the fire of this moment. But just as the shift seemed palpable, the clouds above roared ominously. Distant thunder rumbled, closer, ominous and menacing, sharp with the scent of a storm ready to unleash its fury. Suddenly, an explosion erupted nearby, no longer a metaphor of the chaos swirling around us, but vivid and real, shattering the illusion of safety. The crowd recoiled collectively, a wave of panic washing through, scattering those who had just begun to listen. I felt myself seizing, holding my breath as instinct kicked in. "Jacob!" I screamed, searching desperately through the smoke and chaos for the familiar face of my son. My heart raced, fearing the worst. "Mom!" His voice surged through the upheaval, breaking the cacophony of screams, pulling me back to the moment as I spotted him on the ground, amidst the chaos yet untouched. Even as hope flickered for the connection we had begun to build with those around us, an unyielding shadow threatened to unravel it. What lay before us was more formidable than any lesson about empathy and kindness, an anvil on which our resolve would be tested like never before. The place I had thought of as home transformed into a battleground where truths demanded to be reckoned with, each one more painful and poignant than the last. As the smoke twisted through the air, holding my son's gaze one more time, I knew we stood at the brink of a reckoning, one that pulled with the urgency of survival and the kind of change neither of us had anticipated. And just before we were engulfed in the encroaching shadows, a figure emerged from the haze, an unexpected ally lurking amidst the devastation. Unwittingly, we had begun to forge a path, the peripheral threads of hope intertwining with the tendrils of despair, leading us right into the eye of a storm we could either withstand or become consumed by. The figure that emerged from the swirling smoke was draped in a dark cloak, obscuring most of their features. A flash of recognition ignited a glimmer of hope within me, yet it was quickly muddled by disbelief. How could help arrive now, among the chaos, when every moment felt like we were teetering on the edge of a precipice? "Stay close," I urged Jacob, my voice barely rising above the distant rumble of unrest. The figure stepped forward, moving with an unnerving calmness that stood in stark contrast to the bedlam around us. Just before our path could be entirely consumed by panic, their hand extended from the cloak, revealing a badge glinting under the dim light. "I'm off duty," the figure declared, their voice steady with authority, a blessing in the tempest. "But you need to trust me. I can guide you through." I hesitated, my protective instincts flaring. "We can't just listen," they interjected, urgency piercing through my worries. "The guards out there, some of them are with you, but they're caught in a system that sees labels, not people. You have to move now if you want a chance to reach safety." Jacob's grip tightened on my hand, his small face a mask of confusion and fear, reflecting my own feelings. "Mom, we have to go. Please." His plea ignited within me a determination so fierce, I felt it clawing back the overwhelming dread. I nodded, taking a step closer to the figure, who beckoned us with urgency. "This way." they said, leading us into the enveloping shadows of the alleyway, away from the eruption of hostility and confusion. As we stepped into the dim corridor, part of me wanted to glance back to see if anyone else still clung to hope amidst the despair. The air felt different here, thicker, more suffocating in its silence, but there was a flicker of potential hidden within the darkness. With every cautious step forward, little moments of warmth emerged, a child's laughter echoing from somewhere nearby, the faint whiff of street food mingling with the dampness of the alley. Compassion, connection, strength, and unity. Far from the turmoil we had just escaped, the figure led us deeper into the shadows. I grasped at the fragments of their demeanor, searching for familiarity. A heartbeat of recognition flared again, but the fog of fear obscured it. "Wait, are you?" I dared to ask, grappling with the edges of my memory. The figure paused, turning partially to reveal striking features framed by a cascade of dark curls. "Yes, it's me, Elena." The name hung in the air like a gentle promise, a tether to a time before our lives had spiraled into chaos. A warm rush flooded through me, the fragments of a long-lost friendship unfurling cautiously in light of such turmoil. "Oh, Elena," I breathed, relief mingling with the weight of history as I recalled the laughter and peace we once shared. "We thought we'd lost everyone. You're here. How did you?" "I'm not here for nostalgia," she interrupted, urgency flooding her tone. "We need to keep moving, or the chaos will swallow us whole. Trust me." As we hurried through the alley, glimpses of humanity began to emerge, small shelters fashioned from found materials, flickering candlelight illuminating faces painted with uncertainty, yet still hopeful. They shared hushed conversations, an unspoken bond weaving through their words as if in defiance of the chaos outside. "There are others hiding here," Elena explained, her voice low. "We're forming a community beneath the shadows. This is the place where those of us who still believe in a better tomorrow are coming together. But it won't last if we don't make a stand." The echo of her words reverberated within, resonant, yet haunting. What had we stumbled into? A shelter for the hopeful? The underbelly of our once uncomplicated lives had exploded into something unfathomable. Here we were, clinging to the threads of possibility against the looming threat of despair. There, in that dimly lit haven, Jacob's eyes brightened. "What if we can help them?" he murmured, inspired by the flickering lights and hushed voices around us. "Two don't know, Jacob," my heart quavered at the thought. "We need to think about getting you to safety first. No, Mom." He turned to me, resolute in a way I hadn't seen before. "You taught me to never turn my back on what's right. We can't just leave them." Elena shifted, capturing the determination behind Jacob's plea. "He's right. If enough of us join together, we can push against this. But we need more voices to fill the silence of fear." A wave of uncertainty crashed over me, the turmoil outside clawing like a distant thunderstorm. But what echoed through my heart was the realization that, despite the tides of chaos, we were witnessing the birth of hope, fragile yet fierce. But as quickly as the hope filled the space, shadows shifted once again. Dark forms filled the mouth of the alley as harsh voices sliced through the budding solidarity. "Search everywhere," a familiar voice commanded, authoritative and cold. "They can't have gone far." Panic surged through me, gripping my heart with a new ferocity. I snapped my eyes toward the exit, our only escape, but the way out now felt more like a cage closing around us, narrowing the breadths of possibility we had just started to claim. "Hide," Elena whispered fiercely, urgency pulsing in her words as we ducked behind a stacked set of crates. Jacob pressed against me, trembling. As I crouched there, listening to the fear creeping closer, an unexpected reckoning settled over me, a deep understanding that while the storm raged on outside, it would take a fierce love and a collective spirit to bring the light back to our world. And in that moment, as the menacing voices inched closer, thoughts of what lay ahead plunged me deeper into uncertainty. We could either become ensnared in their grip or find the courage to stand against the darkness together. But before I could decide, an urgent gasp broke from Jacob's lips, and I turned to find his wide eyes locked not on me, but on a figure beneath the thicket of shadows, someone I never expected to see. Someone from our past who could either shatter everything we were fighting for or mend the very rift that had divided us. Time stood still as a revelation crystallized in the dust-strewn air around us. Something more profound than the echoes of fear surrounding the Aliyah chants for truth and forgiveness amidst the chaos. And just like that, we were standing not merely at the brink of a reckoning, but at the pivot of our fate. What emerged next would either shatter the fragile thread of unity we were weaving or bind us tighter together, forever altering our standing in a world ready to dismantle itself. The figure emerged slowly from the shadows, their outline becoming clearer as the darkness receded. I strained to make sense of it, gripping Jacob's shoulder, my heart racing in my chest. "What are you doing here?" The words tumbled from my lips like a reluctant confession, threading through the fear that consumed me. It was Marcus, the embodiment of all that had divided us, the very person I'd dreaded confronting again. His eyes flickered in the dim light, a mixture of surprise and something deeper lurking beneath the surface. "I could ask you the same question," he replied, his voice low but edged with urgency. The unease between us simmered like a simmering pot, ready to boil over. "What are you doing in a place like this?" My grip on Jacob tightened as I replayed the past, the rage, the hurt. Our friendship unraveled underneath the weight of misunderstandings and unspoken truths. Fear quaked in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to shout at him 1,000 accusations perched on my tongue. But this moment wasn't just about the here and now. It was an intersection of everything we had suffered. "I'm here to protect my son," I managed, summoning the courage from an unlikely source. Jacob, his wide blue eyes watching the discord unfold with a shimmering mix of confusion and courage. "Something is happening outside, something terrible. You know it too." Marcus' shoulders tensed, his expression hardening for just a moment. But I caught a flicker of recognition cross his features, a softening that betrayed something deeper, a desire for understanding, perhaps, buried beneath the armor of hatred had constructed. "Yes, I know," he murmured, almost to himself. "But I don't want any more blood on my hands." Blood. The word reverberated through me, resonating with all the chaos that had brought us to this point. It reminded me of the fear inherent in every moment we all faced. It scraped against wounds too raw to lay bare in such a cramped space. "None of us wants that," I said softly, my voice wavering under the weight of his memories. "But we can't let fear dictate our choices. Not anymore." Jacob, still tightly clinging to my arm, nodded as if he understood more than either of us could articulate. "Together, we can be the change," he whispered with the kind of conviction that seemed to ignite the air between us. For a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of hope pierce through Marcus' hardened gaze. But it flickered like a candle struggling against a relentless wind. "Change is dangerous," he replied, almost defiantly. "Kindness doesn't shield anyone from the storm. It just makes you weak. Look around you." I found myself shouting, conviction rising within me. "Look at what your strength has brought us. Division, hatred, fear." My voice shook as the pain of those realizations washed over me. "We have a chance to break that cycle." The voices outside grew louder as the figures of authority swept through the streets, their footsteps resonating like a drum echoing through the stillness. The storm was no longer a metaphor, it was real and looming. Jacob shifted beside me, whispering with hesitance, "Marcus, please. We can help everyone if we work together." His sincerity hung in the air like a lifeline, unwavering and pure. It was a truth that spoke louder than any of the anger surrounding us. I turned to look at Marcus, searching his face for the man I once knew. The fragments of our shared past blurred in my mind, and I felt a flicker of something akin to forgiveness ignite within me. "You know what we need?" I pressed. "This moment, right here, right, calls for bravery. It calls for all of us." Silence stretched between us, the kind of silence that can be shattered in an instant. Then, I saw the shift, the tightening of his jaw, the way his posture softened as he seemed to wrestle with his internal struggle. "I don't know if I can trust you," he finally said, the weight of history pressing down on him. "Trust takes time," I replied, my heart racing. But something in me refused to set down my shield, refused to let fear govern what was possible. "But if we can establish even the smallest act of unity here, it could echo around us. It could make all the difference." As my voice filled the silence in the alley, the echo of conversations blurred into something more significant, voices rising in a cacophony of emotion. The clamor for change grew, feeding off the urgency built upon Jacob's boldness and the courage reflected in his eyes. "I believe we can build a bridge," he said, his gaze unrelenting. "But only if we're willing to open our hearts." There was hardly a moment's pause before Marcus stepped forward, casting aside the cynicism that had clouded his vision for so long. "Fine. He'll listen," he said, and in that moment, a profound quiet thundered through the alley. Each word felt revolutionary, a daring light piercing through the fog of brokenness surrounding us. The sirens shrieked like banshees, descending closer as chaos renewed in the outer world yet. Amid it all, something in me stirred as I watched Marcus, a man once defined by division, step reluctantly into the possibility of unity. It was a radical shift, one that shook the ground beneath me like the rumblings of an awakening storm. "Let's work together, then," I murmured, stepping into the space that he now allowed us to share. It was an echo of hope rising beyond the turmoil, a moment of reconciliation not only for us, but rooted deeply in the hearts of those outside, those lost in their anger. Together, we knelt in that dimly lit alley, and slowly, as if summoned by an unwavering resolve, others began to gather around us, faces emerging from the shadows. Defiance gleamed in their eyes, vulnerability mingling with the urge to reclaim humanity, and a bridge was born in the space between us, binding together every disenfranchised soul daring to envision change. And just as the grumble of authority echoed from the entrance of the alley, I thought, perhaps, we could stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf us all. By melding our voices from the boldness of strangers to the familiar whispers of my past, we echoed back against a world rife with division, at once fragile yet fierce. As the first rays of dawn broke against the horizon, spilling light into the darkness, I grasped Jacob's hand tightly. Hope surged through me, imbuing the air with the promise of change. Perhaps we were not lost, but merely beginning to weave the tapestry of a world renewed, one willed into existence by collective courage, by the strength to choose love above fear. "Hey," I whispered to Jacob, my heart swelling. "Together is where we find strength." He looked up at me, his innocent face radiant with the understanding born from all he had witnessed. The clarity of our purpose glimmered there, a memory of love demanding to be remembered. "Together, Mom," he echoed, as we stepped forward, one brave step at a time, into whatever storm lay ahead. And somewhere in the depth of uncertainty, amid the scarring echoes and looming shadows, I felt the undeniable sting of tears at the edge of my eyes. We would face the world together. "So they won't forget," I said softly, the words taking on life beyond the moment, taking flight into the expansive sky above me, heart trembling with the weight of what we were destined to build. And in that very moment, under the canopy of compassion, the last remnants of despair illuminated by hope shattered into something unforeseen, a resolution, a promise for all of us, igniting the beginning of a journey toward a world where love would finally reign.